There is not too much anime. Looking at you, Digibro. Quantity and variety are two vital traits of a thriving otaku media market. To understand why, we have to understand how quality works at an audience level. I talked about how it works at a creator level. And no, I'm not talking about pushing the right buttons. That's retarded. So what is quality? As I said before, quality is information. But it has to be the right information. It has to be information that facilitates verisimilitude. Or as Tarantino would say, vermicitude. Specifically, patterns of information. Patterns. Why is the type of information that facilitates verisimilitude in like Hunter x Hunter different than the type of information that would facilitate verisimilitude in Suzumiya Haruhi no Yutsu? And then the type of information that would facilitate verisimilitude in like To Lover is going to be different from those. And there's going to be a lot of crossover between like those three works since they're all like relatively similar compared to what's out there. But like each work, you'll notice it has different demands. And you got to understand what this means at the personal level. Verisimilitude is the appearance of truth. In other words, it's the factors that allow a person, the audience, to believe that the universe being depicted in a given work and the things that make up the universe of that work are real, and then proceed to take that work seriously. It's what allows the audience to have their humoring of the work rewarded. And so what do I mean when I say like take the work seriously? All three of the shows I just mentioned, like to some degree or another, don't want the audience to take certain aspects of them seriously. So does this mean that like they're off the hook of normal obligation to verisimilitude? Obviously not. When someone makes a work that isn't meant to be taken fully seriously in that fashion, which is something that obviously happens quite a lot in anime, it is a form of cartooning after all. It doesn't mean that they ripped aspects of the real universe out to arrive at a more simplified, cartoony one they created. What it really means is that they simply made a change. In fact, it's a fallacy altogether to say that like any aspect of a work's universe isn't meant to be taken seriously. The truth is simply that you aren't supposed to look for information to manifest in the exact same patterns it manifests in the universe that we live in. There are new, different patterns that information will manifest in the universe depicted by the work. So if you're watching like a zany show, like say Kinnikuman, it's not that you're turning your brain off to certain information, which is commonly referred to as the suspension of disbelief, and it's bullshit. It's that the aesthetic of Kinnikuman and its narrative are telling you to expect a lot of information to manifest itself differently in that universe. So more specifically, what is verisimilitude? Where does it come from? Well, it starts with the viewer. More specifically, with the deep subconscious understandings of the viewer. By living in this universe that we all live in the same one, we hone our subconscious understandings of how the patterns and laws that constitute this universe work. Thus, without thinking, we can simply feel how well a piece of art is respecting these patterns and laws. That satisfying feeling when a work is showing like strong respect for these patterns and laws, that's verisimilitude. That's why you can get problems when people don't understand the world that they live in enough, because it makes them unable to fully understand art. And this is a huge common problem amongst critics and analysts, and especially in the anime community. So not every universe depicted in fiction works just like our own, especially in anime, as I said. So what happens if, an artist wants to depict a universe that isn't exactly like ours? Like, What are they doing? Well, that's what leads to the topic of a less inclusive work, a more exclusive work. For example, imagine a world where everything is the same except one difference. People can make like literal physical contact with ghosts. It's irrelevant whether or not ghosts exist in real life or not, because we can all agree that people don't commonly make physical contact. That's not a thing. So this simple change of making ghosts a real physical phenomena in this world of the work, it's going to radiate. It seems like a simple change, but it's going to radiate into every other aspect of that universe to at least some extent, even if it's extremely subtle. So the entire system of verisimilitude is going to be different in this work. The viewer will be expecting patterns and laws that correspond to the universe where people can interact with ghosts. This will extend even the most subtle aspects of the work, changing the character acting, for example, in like the most minute of ways, in addition to the tone, plot progression, themes, everything. Everything is just going to have to, what would facilitate verisimilitude in this work is going to be subtly different than if it didn't have this ghost factor. And this is where inclusive versus exclusive comes in. Not every person can conceive of a universe where ghosts can be interacted with. These people who can't conceive of this universe, they're going to be excluded from from being affected by the verisimilitude of the work to at least some extent, if they can't actually get behind this universe, if they can't actually relate to the patterns that this ghost universe could produce. So they're gonna that's making work a little more exclusive. So obviously this can lead to many complications, such as people misjudging the quality of a work, and it can propagate the myth of preference I mentioned in an earlier talk, where people think that preference is just like this chaotic thing from person to person with no predictable pattern. It can lead to like the concept of suspension of disbelief, which I mentioned earlier, which is just inherently flawed and untrue concept. Essentially speaking, the more differences between the universe in a given work of fiction and the universe that we live in real life, the more exclusive that piece of work is going to be. However, obviously, a very inclusive work can have very little broad appeal if it's of low quality, and a very exclusive work can have quite broad appeal if it's of very high quality. So now we're going to imagine like a strange crossover between Lucky Star and Evangelion. So wrap your head around that, where the characters are like a little bit simplified for example's sake. So let's start by taking a work with a very strong exclusive component to it. Let's take Dragon Ball. If we look at our simplified Konata, we find that she enjoys the work a lot. She is an otaku after all, and she can relate to the fetishizing of power and security and freedom that led to the universe. Those were the motivations for the universe depicted in Dragon Ball. And then we got Tsukasa, who's a normie. And there's still enough crossover with our universe and the way our universe works that she can get into it. She can get some enjoyment from Dragon Ball. She can relate, some of the themes and storytelling aesthetic definitely have a very, conventional, our world kind of relatability to them. But then finally we got Shinji. And I made Shinji fucking huge because he's larger than life. And he's a beast. And he finds himself unable to get into Dragon Ball really at all, even if he tries. And that is because Shinji is an otaku like Konata, but he's a bit of a different type of otaku. And I'll get into the 3 types of otakus in a different lecture. So I won't stress like the grit here, but Shinji's infatuation with insecurity and like unconventional sources of power makes him unable to relate to Dragon Ball's world, where like classic masculinity and the brute force of an individual are greatly rewarded and maintained by that universe. So thus, Shinji's out of the loop of instances that would normally facilitate verisimilitude in Dragon Ball, and thus we can say he is excluded from the work. Now, let's take another fairly polarizing work, even more polarizing work, like School Days, which is a work that our boy Shinji can get behind, and that is because the self-loathing and eternally insecure Shinji, he digs it. He digs this universe of School Days built on distrust and nihilism. He can relate to the inherently stressful atmosphere and the lack of protection the universe offers to like the character egos and stuff. And then we got Konata, who is of course an otaku as well, but she can relate to the universe of School Days so far as the aesthetic motivations to sort of make a story that cruelly sexually exploits anime personalities. She gets that aesthetic. But she can't really get into the real grit like Shinji can, because she can't relate to all those, dark motivations like Shinji. And then we got Tsukasa, who just she looks at School Days and she just sort of sees an absurd product of someone's perverted imagination. And she just just a spectacle there. Needless to say, she's excluded from the work. So then if we take a work like the original Ginga Eiyu Densetsu, or Space People as I like to call it, everyone in the Lucky Star Evangelion crossover is pretty much going to have a more or less fairly equal opportunity to get into that work, as long as they humor it. And the reason for this is that the original Ginga Eiyu Densetsu, it just isn't that anime in that anime sense, in that using anime as an adjective. In other words, it's not making great efforts to make the universe it's trying to describe different from the universe that we live in. Obviously, it is different. But compared to like every anime I've mentioned up to this point in this video, it's not that different. Thus, it's a more inclusive work. So, the thing that a lot of people don't understand, including otaku themselves, is that the otaku are a people devoted to the unconventional. What that means is that it's natural to see way more otaku works that are much more exclusive than what's put in like American theaters or what has been written in literature throughout the centuries. That's why, Digibro's concept, anime should be for everyone. An anime should come out, should be a world. No, it can't be that. It's not meant to be a mainstream thing. It's for people with an inherently underground mentality. Anime is not just cartoons. It's not just like Walt Disney making cartoons. Anime may simply mean animation in Japanese, but the term anime, when used as an adjective, is really just synonymous with in the otaku spirit. So now you may start to see why it's so destructive when people try to say that there needs to be less like generic works catering to stupid otaku and shit. These works, which normies and normies turned anime fans don't understand the verisimilitude of, are literally the backbone of the culture. Therefore, like, the more variety and quantity we have of these types of works, the stronger the ultimate otaku identity will be, the more it will be reinforced and strengthened. So, no, Digibro, we should not dissolve the shows that otaku actually give a shit about to pump money into Mahoutsukai no Yome. Mahoutsukai no Yome was a terrible show. Cheat card. I will explain what the collective otaku aesthetic is finally, and I will illuminate the essence of anime in general, that word anime as we know it in America. So I have booked a classic hero for the next one, who you all know and love. And I won't tell you who he is, but let's just say I'll be giving you all the D. 君は時の